All right, everybody, welcome in. Today, I am pleased and excited to be joined by Barney Whiter, all the way across the pond, as we say here. And are you in London? Is that right, Barney? Is that where you are today? Or based out of, I think. Am I correct?
I'm outside London, kind of the outer burbs of London, you could call it.
Okay, the Outer Burbs of London. Awesome. It's an interesting way that Barney and I connected. The world is fascinating, weird, and so is just the community of people who want to talk about their issues with substances, alcohol, drugs, or other addictions or dependencies. And Barney, why don't you start off by kind of giving us a rundown of who you are and what you do in your home, in your hometown, in London, or in the country, I guess, really.
So I'm in a little town called Farnham in Surrey, which is about 40 miles southwest of London. And um, I what do I do now? What
Yeah.
I do now is I coach people. So I do financial coaching first and foremost. I do career coaching, and I also kind of mix in a bit of health coaching in there as well. And so I see that those three things sound very different, like finances, career, and health. But what I do is at the intersection of those three things. So if you imagine like a Venn diagram, three overlapping circles,
Hmm.
I'm the intersection in the middle of
Right.
money, career, and health. And the health aspect I see a lot of people with burnout.
It's a
I
big
see a
thing
lot of
here.
people who so it's a big problem. I mean, I worked in finance for like 25 years, and the modern world is kind of going in a direction whereby people seem to, be more and more prone to burnout, or maybe we just talk about it more. I don't know, but either way, um, people with burnout is a big part of what I do. And I had a sort of an extreme money journey, an extreme finance journey, which culminated rather in me quitting banking and corporate finance advice about 10 years ago. Um, and I had, by that point, when I was like 43, um, paid my mortgage off and saved up a sort of a freedom, what I call a freedom fund.
Hmm.
Um, and and so ever since then, I've been writing a blog. The blog's kind of called The Escape Artist, and it's kind of a joke. It's a play on words. There's an image. My brand, as it were, is a little cartoon of people digging themselves a tunnel out of the prison camp
Yeah.
to the free to the tree line to freedom. And that's kind of what I did in my job. I dug my way out slowly, painstakingly, sort of pebble by pebble, month by month, paycheck by paycheck, stashing it away till I could afford to quit. And on that journey, I had a number of ups and downs. I had a number of like brushes with depression,
Mm.
anxiety. I used alcohol as a tool for a lot of that. For a lot of that time, and I suffered from burnout myself. So those, finance, career change, and health. That's the path that I've walked. Those are the things I know a lot about from my own personal experience and my reading and my coaching. And so for the last 10 years, I've been, yeah, as I say, coaching people, writing about those issues. Um, and that's kind of what brings me here today.
That is amazing. Good for you, man, because uh, we need more people like you that are willing to do what you did. I mean, I know that a lot of the work that you did, you benefited from it, but just speaking to people about your experiences with it, about being able to recognize the burnout, being able to recognize that they're not living the healthiest life, being able to recognize that I can change my mindset when it comes to money, finances, financial independence, if you will. So let's take a step back. What led you into that field, and what was the driving motivation along the way, or were there more than one that led you down the path that you went to?
Well, it was prostitution that led me into that field in the sense that like finance was where the money was. You know, like
Right.
that old joke of
Yeah.
like his ask, like, why did you rob banks? And it's like, well, that's where the
Where the
money
money
was. And
was.
so when people say to me, like, why did I'm like, why did you work in banks? Well, that's where the money was.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Yeah, right. There you go. There's your
So
answer.
if you think about the UK, the UK is a smaller economy than the US. And like the one field, in the 80s and 90s and noughties where the UK had a sort of world-class industry was finance. And so that's where the money was. That's where I went.
So with his lifestyle, obviously,
So that
go
so
ahead. Go ahead. No, no, you go ahead.
I kind of joke, yeah, it was chasing the money that got me into this mess, into that life, into a somewhat extreme lifestyle, a somewhat extreme focus on work, a somewhat unbalanced work-life balance. Um, it was chasing the money, did that. And so if I then step back from that and say, well, why did you chase the money? Why was that so important to you? Why did you go down that path in the first place? Well, I have over the years kind of tried to sort of self-analyze and like do a bit of therapy on myself.
Mm.
And the time that I tie that back to is 1981, when my parents, we just moved house. I was 11 years old. My dad worked in construction. My mum was a teacher, and they'd done the sort of classic thing of buying the biggest house that they could possibly afford and borrowing the most money that they could afford. They've stretched themselves to get up the housing ladder. And shortly after they did that, interest rates in 1981 went to 17%. And if you can imagine the state of the economy today, if everyone's mortgage rate was 17%, you've got a sense for like the state of disquiet in the Whiter family household in 1981. Um, and so, it wasn't like, you know, it was fine. No one slept under a bridge. Like we didn't lose the house, but there was a lot of anxiety in the household that year.
Mhm.
And so my dad had to, funnily enough, my dad, he couldn't afford to buy beer. So he had to like start making homebrew. My awful stuff. They had to cancel the newspaper. We couldn't go on holiday that year. So, not, normal sort of stuff. Not the end of the world. But as a young, impressionable guy, I picked up on the anxiety of my parents, and my mother in particular was very anxious. And I kind of got from that episode that it's kind of a scary thing to be in debt. It's kind of a scary thing if you can't meet your mortgage payments. Like ultimately, the bank can take your house away from you. And so from that point onwards, I kind of orientated myself to avoid the situation of being in a lot of debt. And so, I did my schooling, and then I chose an economics degree. And then I moved to London. I trained as a chartered accountant, or CPA, as you guys would call it, qualified, and then went into corporate finance advice and investment banking, and then spent the next sort of 20 years, chasing the money, being a prostitute, as it were.
Nice. Well, it's true. How childhood anxieties, traumas, experiences really do dictate what your life is like in the future, whether you realize it or not. It's you mentioned something how your family, your parents, pardon me, scaled back so much that your dad started making homebrew. Well, my mom grew up in a really poor, poverty-stricken home, and her parents were really big drinkers, but her dad, same reason. He made his own moonshine. So, they had like a little
Yeah.
moonshine still set up in the house. Anyway, so it's the lengths that we will go to sometimes. So, now you're in finance. And I'm assuming you probably, since you were so motivated, worked your way up through the finance ladder. And as you do that, my understanding and through people that I know that are or formerly were in finance, that the more you go up the ladder, the more intense it gets, the more exciting almost that it gets. When did you really start, if you do a little self-diagnosing or self-reflecting, when do you think that the drinking that ended up kind of becoming a real problem for you, when do you feel like that started to creep in and be used, like you said, as a tool?
Hmm. I don't know because it really is like the frog that gets boiled in the pan, like that slowly the temperature gets turned up
Mm-hmm.
and there's never one moment where you go from, oh, it's not a problem to it's a problem. It just crept up on me. And so, I had a 35-year drinking career. So let's say I started, at 17
Okay, yeah.
and I ran that till I was 52, so like almost 3 years ago now. And I don't know what I don't know what the moment was when I kind of tipped over from,
Yeah.
responsible drinking to irresponsible drinking. I mean, the truth be told, I was doing some irresponsible drinking at right from the get-go, age 17. And so, I started drinking with mates, Friday, Saturday night down the pub, kind of classic male British sort of binge drinking culture.
Mm.
And so, I was kind of drinking irresponsibly right from the start.
Okay, I can relate to that wholeheartedly. Um, did you, were there other uh, aspects of your life, actions or habits that you had that you feel could have influenced the amount you were drinking, or did it manifest itself in other aspects of your career? You know, for me, I notice lots of old habits that will crop up, even though I haven't had a drink or a drug in over 10 years. And I think back, oh wow, so I've always sort of had this tick or this habit, and that led me to, cope or use booze as a tool to self-soothe. Do you find that you have anything like that going on in your life? And if so, what are you doing now to, uh, I wouldn't say necessarily correct it, but to manage it?
So I just had this very strong um, association between, alcohol and, what I call conditional rewards. So
Mm,
the idea was that if I work hard during the working week, then we get to Friday, then we get to Saturday, and your reward for working hard and kind of sublimating and like pushing down what you might otherwise want to do.
hmm.
Your reward is the escape of the intoxication, that sort of little buzz, that you get 2, 3 drinks in. And so essentially it's a kind of, it's a classic sort of Protestant work ethic, with interspersed by rewards. Like, your Friday beers are the reward for the work week. And so that's how I always saw it. I saw it as, work hard, play hard. And I just increasingly saw alcohol as my treat and my reward. And the longer that goes on for in your life, the more you just realize that you've made it like the center after a period of time. And so that's the sort of frog in the pan bit, like that,
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing that creeps up on you. And I don't know I don't know at what point it became, um, I don't know at what point it kind of became a problem.
Right.
Uh, I never considered myself an uncontrolled alcoholic in the sense that I could always go a week without alcohol. My problem was that once I started, like I didn't do moderation.
Yeah. Okay.
And so again, it's these things. These things have a cadence, so
Yeah.
my working week had a cadence, my drinking had a cadence. There was a rhythm and a regularity to it, and like over a 35-year period, that gets ingrained.
It
So
does. Yeah.
the way I put it is like you're kind of it's like training a dog, but you're the dog, and over that long period, you train yourself to like work for not for not doggy chocks or doggy rewards. You train yourself to work for beer or work for wine, and that pattern, I hadn't realized how ingrained that was, and I just hadn't appreciated the damage that I was doing to
Mm,
myself.
yeah.
Because my mentality, I did take care of myself. I've always exercised. I've always like cycled and done, run and go to the gym. And I thought, like an idiot, I thought, oh, I can drink and then I can burn off. Like I can burn off the calories, I can burn off the alcohol, I
Yeah.
can I can magically reverse, magically reverse the effects of this thing.
Hmm.
Um, and that worked until it didn't. And what I hadn't appreciated was, alcohol is a poison, thousand cuts, and it's the cumulative. For me, it was the cumulative effect over like a 35-year drinking career that caught up with me, and eventually it's like, okay, and I've now got two very visible like red lights on my dashboard. So I had two health scares, and at that point, I couldn't kind of ignore it anymore.
So you retired at 43, right? So you were what? Retired for about 9 or 10 years before you stopped using alcohol. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't. I tend not to use the R word, but I
Sure.
certainly I quit banking.
Quit banking.
I quit
Okay.
my serious corporate job
Okay.
at age 43. And so yeah, that's when I got off the hamster wheel,
Sure.
got out of banking, and certainly changed the pace of my life.
Did you find by changing the pace of your life then, since you mentioned how you used, your beers or what have you as a reward system for the hard work that you put in during the week, so the harder you worked, the harder you partied, and as you left the banking, now that's quite a change in lifestyle because you have to be, up all the time. Like it's a high intensity, high vibration, however you want to frame it. So when you transition out of that and into whatever the new career is that led, I mean, obviously what you're doing now, there's lower intensity. There's a propensity to have more time on your hands. Did you see? Were you drinking more during that because you had a little more time on your hands, or did you maintain that same sort of, working for the work weekend pattern? And when you, if it was either or, did it ever really increase, or did you just sort of plateau until your body said, "Hey, wait a minute, we gotta stop this"?
So yeah, you're absolutely right. I kind of overnight, age 43, over from working whatever, like 60 hours a week or 70 hours a week, whatever it was, to nothing. And so that's what I call like a cliff edge transition.
For sure.
And I say to my coaching clients, if you're in the position where you're transitioning to financial independence, it's much better to have an evolution rather than a revolution. It's much easier to kind of dial down your hours gradually, go to 4 days a week or whatever, rather than go from all all in to nothing overnight. And so yeah, I kind of to some extent lost my routine. I lost some of my structure. I changed my environment. I'm really at home with more time on my hands. And, there's that old phrase, the devil makes work for idle hands. So I definitely lost one of the breaks on my drinking. So, previously I'd always had the break of, well, if you've got a big meeting the next day, you're not going to be drinking. And so when as soon as I had control over my diary, I kind of had the ability then to drink during the week.
So, the big C word, COVID, that had a huge effect on a lot of people in my life, either immediate or on the periphery. And a lot of people I know, again, I was in recovery during that, so I didn't really have any issues as far as any kind of substance dependency. But I know a lot of people that you could just drink all day long, I mean, if you were working, everything was done virtually. So no one could even see that you were doing what you were doing. And that I know a handful of people personally that was, their bottom, that was their burnout. That's when everything kind of fell apart for them in terms of their alcohol use and dependency and addiction. And I know people that became dependent and addicted to alcohol and other substances during that time. They saw themselves as more of a social drinker or a weekend drinker, but it grew and grew and grew, and then it became a real problem. So for someone like you that felt that you had control for the most part over your drinking, what was that period of time like for you?
Well, for me, prior to COVID, I was coaching people, but it was face to face.
Mm.
And so I was, people were coming to my house or I would go meet them in London, but everything I did was face to face. And suddenly, that all just evaporates. So essentially overnight, my sort of face to face coaching business, I mean, business is a little bit of a grand term for what it was. It was a sort of lifestyle business or side hustle, really. But my coaching business evaporated overnight. And so suddenly, yeah, like I mean, that year it was funny in the UK because, March, April, May of 2020, we had this glorious, glorious spring. So we had just
Right.
glorious weather. We had lockdowns. Everyone's in the garden. And, if you're in the UK, there's this weird association between, the sun coming out and everyone drinking.
Right.
So so you're absolutely right. Your comments about COVID, suddenly a bunch of people, stuck at home, nothing to do. In the UK, you just had this sort of glorious weather. And, they shut the gyms and they kept the alcohol shops open, which tells you something about British people's priorities. Um, and so for me, um, it, COVID wasn't COVID actually was, funnily enough, that was kind of the end of my drinking career, not because it's where my consumption ran out of control, but it just happened to come at a time after I'd been drinking for, 33 years or something. And my body was just saying, no, something's got to change here. So um, I can't remember the exact year. I think it was 2021, but it was the year after the COVID thing hit. And I had a couple of health scares, health issues in quick succession. One was I went and had an endoscopy, and where they put a sort of camera down your throat, goes down your esophagus and into your stomach, and they inspect where the camera's gone, and I had a condition called Barrett's esophagus, and where essentially you've got an abnormal inflammation of the lining of the esophagus, and that converts to cancer, esophageal cancer, with like odds that I didn't like 25% or higher. So that was punch to the face number one. And then worse than that, punch to the face number two was sometime after COVID or around that time, I just completely lost my sex drive. I lost my
Mm.
libido, and I just lost all interest in that completely. And I'm like, hold on, like what's going on? Like why is that? And so that really set me on a quest like almost like a sort of detective quest to find out like, well, what could have been, what could possibly do that to me. And I spent sort of, I don't know, 18 months, 2 years reading every book on health and longevity and wellness and, um, sort of, the biochemistry of desire that I could get my hands on. And eventually I had to sort of acknowledge the awful truth, like it's probably the thing that's right in front of you,
Usually
and
is.
it's probably the alcohol. So I tried really hard to ignore that.
Mm.
I mean, I actually spoke to a health coach and he said, well, that'll be the drink, that'll be the alcohol. And I was like, I came here for you to lie to me and tell me that it wasn't the alcohol.
Well,
I just wasn't ready to hear it.
no, no, and that's the thing. You're not ready until you're ready, but it's, just as a former prostitute in the financial, losing your libido must have been really costly for you. Um, it was a silly attempt at humor. Anyway, th that is it. There's a saying that I've heard over and over that we're always the last ones to find out, right? That it was a problem. We didn't want to admit that it was a problem, and finally something occurred to where it was a problem. And for you, you had these two really significant health scares, and you had this person that along the way that was like, "That's it's just the drink, it's the drink, it's the booze, it's the booze." No, it's not. No, it's not. No, it's not. And you were self-aware enough to recognize, okay, yeah, they're right. It is. And I do need to make this change. And there are many people out there, unfortunately, that just cannot bring themselves to do that. Was there something in your daily practices through either your coaching or your exercise regimen or just something along the way that lent itself to show you how to be more self-aware? Or is that just kind of like a natural inclination that you had?
Yeah, it's something of a natural inclination for me to kind of look, like lean into reality,
Hmm.
kind of not and on some level I inherently believe that if you work hard enough and you stick at it and you grind through it, you can kind of chew your way through, you know, any particular brick wall that you set your mind to.
Sure.
That now that may not be sort of 100% true, but that is what I call a helpful belief. Um, and so, in terms of my finance career, like that was the belief that sustained me when I'm doing my, chartered accountancy exams, which I was just not a natural at all. I was actually not very good at maths. But I kind of just brute forced my way through my finance exams. I brute forced my way through my banking career. I was never the most, I always felt like I was the sort of dumbest person in the room, a lot of the time.
Hmm.
But, my way of like dealing with that was, well, okay, I can sort of grind it out and I can outwork, people, et cetera, et cetera. So I always kind of had a little bit of that sort of no pain, no gain mentality that sort of serves me well it served me well in my finance career, although you could argue actually like maybe that wasn't helpful to sort of be able to keep yourself in that situation for so long. But nevertheless, it kind of got me up the ladder in my finance career. And it's I've run a marathon just through ran a marathon just without training once. So just sheer bloody mindedness. I wanted to say that I can run a marathon without training for it. And so I just
Oh,
turned up on the day and it was a terrible time. I mean, it took me 4 hours 40 or something. It was no fun at all.
uh-uh.
But I'm just that sort of stubborn sort of person that will grind it out.
Wow. I've run 3 marathons, and to just show up and run a marathon, you are fucking nuts to do that. I'm sorry. That is just insane. So you've got this grinded out mentality, and now you are using using your life experiences, right, to coach other people. Do you find that the grinded out aspect of it helps you work better with people? And also back to the self-awareness aspect of it. When you're working with these people, let's just say you're a business coach or a lifestyle coach with somebody, self-awareness is really a good tool for most of us to have. And like you are fortunate you have it. You kind of naturally came to you. For me, it took me a really long time to want to accept these particular, not just that I had an issue with drugs and alcohol, but so many other things once I got clear of all that, that I still was challenged and struggling with that I didn't even want to admit then, but finally came to accept it. And now I am more self or more openly self-aware about who I am and what I need to do in my day to day and overall experience in life. Are you able to get people to that point to show them that? If so, is there some sort of, personal experience or a tool that you use to get people to that point? I'm fascinated by it. I think recovery, the self-awareness is a huge key. And if there's something that clicks with somebody, I think it would be really helpful. So I'm curious, what might you do with a client you're coaching to help them, become or help them to find their self-awareness?
So, um, what I don't do is just kind of uh, push my own like model onto everyone else. So what I don't do is say like, oh, everyone needs to do what I did and just
Sure.
chew through a brick wall, okay? Because in some ways, like I'm good at that. I can chew through brick walls, but it's like, is that even the right thing to be doing? Is that's kind of bad for your teeth for one thing. It often doesn't taste great either. So what I make a big effort to do is like meet people where they are
Mm.
and just try and have an understanding of where they are on their journey and just try and think like for this individual person, um, what will be the one thing that will have the most effect? Like, what will be the one change or the one intervention that would unlock other growth, other improvements, other developments? And so one of my little catchphrases is like you're only as strong as your weakest link.
Mm.
And so I mean, to exaggerate the point, if you're an out and out alcoholic, that is your weakest link, and that's the thing you need to fix. And kind of nothing else matters until you fix that. So like it really just you're not gonna until you've removed your alcohol addiction, like everything else is a sideshow, everything else is a distraction. That's your weakest link. You need to fix that. But but if someone is there are moderate drinkers out there. I mean, just because Barney can't do moderation doesn't mean other people can't do
Right.
moderation. So what I don't say to everyone else, well, you can't drink ever again. You must give it up 100%, like because that's different for them. So what I'm looking for is the thing that will trigger an aha moment in them. And so I will, that's so varied. So I have like a big long list of books that I'll reach for and give people to read, and I've got the books. I've got like 30 books that kind of changed my life, and I'll pull from that list and give them copies of the book to read. Sometimes I'll give people films to watch.
Mm.
Sometimes I'll give people like a little homework, like you've got to go and run 5K. Other people, I will. So here's a weird one. Here's a weird one. I'll tell you to give you an example. When people are feeling overwhelmed with, say, a promotion, and they just feel like they're out of their depth, I will often suggest to them that they do two things, like watch the film The Darkest Hour and then go to the Cabinet War Rooms in London, which is Churchill's underground bunker. And it's just a very visceral way to see like the ultimate example of someone that was out of his depth,
Yeah.
because in 1940, like he was out of his depth. Like we were all out of our depth. We should have lost that. You know, it was a shit show. And you realize when you watch that film and you go visit the bunker, you realize what a hopeless situation it must have seemed like at the time, and yet somehow he was able to put one foot in front of the other and function and get through each day and like mud along until something, i.e. the Americans, showed up. Um, so, so, I will just give people like things to do, experiences to have, suggestions that, will hopefully just give them a new perspective.
That's great. Those two words,
And,
experiences. Oh, go
into
ahead. No, go ahead.
and that includes in the alcohol, in the alcohol field as well. So I've kind of read all the quit lit books, and I'll try and match the tone of the book to the personality of the person I'm talking to.
So you mentioned experience and suggestions. And those are two very, very big words that people tend to, I don't know, ignore because a suggestion is not like making you or forcing you to do something. It's just like, hey, you might want to try this, and the experience you get through this suggestion might be that one thing that unlocks the change that you need to make. And you mentioned also, the you're only as strong as your weakest link. And in my sobriety, that has been true. I was flaming out in sobriety, man. I was a fucking mess mentally for several years in my sobriety. And it was one of those things that, you know, it was staring me right in the face the entire time but I didn't want to accept it. I didn't want to do anything about it. And when I finally did, it wasn't that hard. It was more difficult to deal with that weak link
Mm,
day to day to day than it
mm,
was to recognize it and move beyond it, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that weak link
mm,
was going to go away. It was going to maybe just stay there, but recognizing that it's there, recognizing that this is what's causing you whatever the issue is that you're feeling, getting beyond that is huge. You don't there's certain things in that you cannot change about yourself. But if you acknowledge that they're there and recognize that, hey, this part of me is what's causing me to be a fucking head case. Okay, well now I know that, I recognize that, and now I can do something about getting beyond it. And when it comes back around, I may have, suggestions or experiences that'll help me manage to get beyond it again. And this goes to a word. I wrote this word down because you mentioned it when you were you said, I think you were coaching some of your finance people, but you mentioned the word evolution. And that's something that I have
mm,
been talking about of late with people is that, you know, as your sobriety or as you evolve as a human, as a person, as you mature and evolve, get older, more experienced, all these things that constantly keep you evolving, either greatly or just a teeny bit at a time, you're always continuing to evolve. So does your recovery, right? So a lot of people maintain the same path. It becomes eventually the path of least resistance when they are trying to be sober and in recovery and not going back and depending on those old, the drugs, the alcohol, work, whatever it is. Um, what do you find for you? I'm intrigued for you personally that as you're evolving with your abstinence and moving farther and farther beyond the alcohol issue that you had, you know, is there anything in you that has evolved and through that maybe something outside of yourself, whether it's a daily routine or a meditation or anything that might help keep
mm.
you moving past that?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I did not invent this phrase. I stole this. But it's not recovery, it's discovery. So you know this idea that you're not just trying to get back to where you were, but without the alcohol. The process of quitting alcohol, that kind of fire that you go through, you will that will change you. You will come out the other side different, better, stronger, more resilient. Um, it's an ongoing process of discovery of like, okay, who am I? Like, why did I do that? Like, what purpose did the alcohol serve? Because it always serves a purpose. I mean, Gabor Mate is very good on this. It's like, it's not like heroin addicts don't know that it's bad for them. They don't just need to be told, oh, don't you know that that's bad for you? It's like, I mean, I'd been sick enough times to know, yeah, this probably isn't great for me.
So true, man.
Um, so it's not like you need to be told like, oh, it's bad for you. There is a rationality to addiction in the sense that generally the addict is getting a benefit from it. And
Yeah.
so you have to like kind of be radically honest about, okay, there is a benefit to this, like, but what is it? And so, most addicts have some sort of trauma somewhere in their background, and they are using the drug, the alcohol to numb that, to escape that, to to change their state, to self-medicate in one way or the other. But and in that sense, alcohol is very reliable. Every time I drank it, it changed my state. So there's always a sort of reason why people why people drink, and when you stop drinking, you will find out what that reason was, because those emotions will come up. They'll bubble up. You will realize that you were suppressing them with alcohol, you were evading them with alcohol, you were avoiding them with alcohol, and so yeah, like those emotions will bubble up, and the process of confronting those, working through them, that will change you. So that's discovery. And in terms of like, routines, I mean, I just keep a health diary every day. And I have done for, for even before I gave up the alcohol is when I started it actually. But so I've been going about 4 years with the health diary, and each day I write my number, on today's number. In other words, the number of alcohol-free days,
Right, right.
and that's for me is a little it's a little routine. And I know that if every day I kind of write down my number and it's +1 from the day before, and I do certain things, like I get morning sunlight before 9 a.m., and there's some element of like exercise, and I eat sort of clean, then I kind of know that seriously fall off. I can't seriously get off the path too far. So I'll have, obviously we all have like good days and bad days, but I know if I, write my number in my health diary and I do those things, I kind of know I won't fall off the wagon.
That is really, really solid advice and suggestion right there. Uh, I have, when I talk to people, I'm like the your day to day in recovery. Some days you just have to keep it very, very simple. I mean, you mentioned three things: morning sunlight, which could
Mm,
be a walk. Two, you clean, so you kind of get
yep,
yourself together to get your mind clear, and then essentially you keep track of your day, but it's essentially the same thing as journaling. You have a process where you write down what your day was, and for you, it was another successful day without a drink of alcohol. And I have gotten as corny as like,
yep,
hey, why don't you wear shoes with laces and tie your laces today? And that's good. That's good, right?
mm,
Just very,
mm,
very
mm,
basic
mm,
acts that when you look back on the day, right? You are in this rhythm now where you're like, okay, I got my three things done, four things done. I got my sunlight, I did some cleaning, I did my journal, and I didn't drink. And those four things make it a really good day. And if you're able to get past or get beyond that and go have better experiences, then the day just improves. And I think it's, when I was drinking, it was ritualistic too, right? But I mean, I kind of had to be doing the same thing every day, right, to get to that drink. And to completely eliminate that, you're sort of twisting in the wind because you're like, well, what my rhythm is all messed up now. I don't have a rhythm. You have to make a new
Mm,
one.
mm,
And what you mentioned, I
mm.
think, is just really important because it's taking care of yourself in a kind way, and it's also reminding yourself
Yeah.
that I can't be drinking. And that's just it's really important for people to hear that and to hear the message in any way that they can, because we don't experience, see, or hear things the same way as the person next to us. So part of the reason why I'm doing this podcast is to have as many open conversations, because for one, I always selfishly I learn a ton of stuff, but I want people that listen to it that maybe there's something that the person I'm talking with or what we bring up during that conversation will help them kind of like change their rhythm, get through their day, improve their day, and hopefully they stack enough of them up,
Mm.
things start to improve better down the road. Um, so this has been fantastic, Barney. I really
Times,
had a
isn't
blast.
it? It- It's like it's like, eat your greens, do some exercise, get, go to bed at a decent
Yeah,
time, get lines.
yeah.
But it's how do you embed ha
We,
habits that support, get you a little better each day?
yeah, that's it. That's it. A little bit each day. That's the part of the of getting through this
Mm.
is you do have to allow yourself patience and some grace to get through it. But yeah, it's not gonna happen all at once. But your life doesn't happen all at once either.
Mm.
So you got to take it a little bit at a time. And before you know it, you have, like you said, you've built up a well of experiences that you can then lean back on when you need to. And those experiences can help you through a hardship. But more often than not, you're going to find that they really enhance the moment that you're in and enhance your future life. So it's all worth the work. It's just really difficult sometimes, most times.
You've got to be patient, and
Yeah,
you have to be patient with some of this stuff. And I mean, if I can give a shout out to a book that helped me,
please.
um, I read I read a great book called The Biology of Desire by Mark Lewis. And Mark Lewis is a very interesting guy because he's a neuroscientist. But more interestingly than that, he was a heroin addict in his 20s. And so there's not many sort of professors of neuroscience that are ex-heroin addicts that got clean.
Hmm.
And so he not only understands like the physiology and the biochemistry of addiction, but he's kind of lived through it as well. So he's got real skin in the game and a real understanding of like the addict mindset. And I read that book, and that was the thing that spelt it out for me. That's when the penny dropped. Like, oh, it's your alcohol habit that's like killing your libido. Apparently, it's very common. So if you're a heroin addict, for example, most heroin addicts lose their sex drive. They lose interest in work. They lose interest in their children because the way he frames it is alcohol is a progressive narrowing of the things that bring you pleasure. And so
Mm.
your ability to get pleasure is just shrinking down and focusing on the alcohol in my case, or the heroin in someone else's case. And that kind of squeezes out the other source of pleasure, joy, happiness in your life. And that essentially rewires your dopamine system over the period that you're abusing the substance. But here's the good news. It's like the brain is this plastic. You have this ability to rewire your brain with time, the brain is inherently capable of change and learning new like pathways and learning new habits. And basically, he spelled it out for me. He's like, okay, you just got to be patient, and if you go a year, you'll be fine. And I'm like, I just needed to read that. I just needed to read,
Right. You just,
you'll be
yeah,
fine, but you've just got to give it some time.
you do, man. And neuroplasticity is some fucking crazy stuff. Take a deep dive into that and find out what
Yeah,
your brain can do after you get off all the substances, because it not only can repair itself, but it can enhance itself in ways that you didn't think your mind was possible to be enhanced with. And that's not even using psychedelics. That's just time, patience, doing some good things for yourself, and
yeah,
you can heal.
yeah,
You literally can heal. It's
yeah,
managing the emotions that are the
yeah.
difficult part. Once you get that management under control, your brain's going to take care of itself. It's fucking crazy. Why don't you plug a little bit about or you're the escape artist, what you do, let people know, and the floor is yours, sir.
Yeah, thank you. So I write a blog. My website is The Escape Artist. So it's www.theescapeartist, all one word, then .me. So not .com, not .co.uk, theescapeartist.me. And there, um, there's a sort of sample of what I do. And I write a weekly-ish sort of um, Substack email that you can kind of sign up for there. And like that's the best thing to go check out, www.theescapeartist.me.
Fantastic. Barney, this has been really, really great. I've enjoyed this immensely. Thank you for making and taking the time. I'm really happy we did this.
Great to talk to you. Thank you for thank you so much for having me.
All right. Take care.